Do you know, mister? Parker looked straight into my eyes, pausing between each word. It's been 2 years, and your son hasn't said a single word in class. I froze. Those words hit me like a hammer to the chest. I stood there in the empty hallway, unable to breathe. On the bench by the classroom door, Leo, my 8-year-old boy, sat curled up, clutching his backpack like someone might snatch it away. Head down. Didn't look at me. Didn't say a word. I swallowed hard and asked, my voice breaking, "At home, he barely talks. But at school, he doesn't talk at all." "Mister," Parker shook his head gently. "It's not just that he talks less. He doesn't talk at all. 2 years now. Not a single word. He's well behaved, never causes trouble. But it's like he's locked inside a box and none of us can find the key. I'm afraid one day we'll lose him before we even understand what's happening." I gripped the stack of papers in my hand so tight that the edges cut into my skin. Didn't even feel the pain. His words stayed with me all the way home. That night, I stood at Leo's door. The room was dim, only a bit of light spilling in through the window. On the walls, dozens of drawings, taped up everywhere. Not superheroes, not cars. A house on fire, a woman walking away, and a man, me I guess, standing frozen at the door. I looked at those rough little drawings, and my chest ached so bad I could barely breathe. In that moment, I finally understood. The day his mother left, in his eyes, it was an explosion, and I never ran in to save him. For 2 years, I thought I was raising my son. But the truth is, I was letting him drown in his own silence. That night, I sat on the floor, and for the first time, I admitted to myself, if I get one more chance, I'll pull him out of that silent world, no matter what it takes. People often say that a man over 40 should be as solid as a tree. But I've learned something. Even a tree that looks strong on the outside can be hollow inside. Before everything fell apart, my life was simple, quiet. I worked as a mechanical engineer at a manufacturing company, morning to work, evening in the garage fixing things. Dinner with my wife and my son. Our small suburban house had nothing fancy. But every time I opened that front door, the sound of my boy's laughter made me feel like the richest man alive. Leo was my joy, 8 years old, with eyes that were always full of light. On weekends, he loved to follow me into the garage, picking up bolts I dropped, sitting there fiddling with things he didn't even understand. Once he knocked over a whole box of screws, metal scattering everywhere, and he just looked up and laughed. On other nights, the three of us sat around the table, drawing. Claire drew a house with 3 windows. I drew machines. Leo drew cars. It was so simple. Looking back now, those memories feel like an old film reel. The colors faded, but every time I replay them in my head, they still hurt. Until that one rainy night. I came home late from work. Claire was in the kitchen, both hands gripping a glass of water. She said quietly, "Nathan, I'm tired. I just want to be free." Her voice was soft as a breath, but it crushed my whole life. I thought it was just a burst of anger. I apologized. I promised to change. But a few weeks later, she packed up, left the divorce papers on the table, and walked away, never looked back. I got custody of Leo, and from that day on, the laughter in our house disappeared. I tried to keep things the same, told myself that if I loved him enough, everything would be fine. But the harder I tried, the further he drifted. Leo stopped talking. He didn't cry either. He just looked at me with those sad eyes and shut his door. Many nights, I stood outside his room, knocking softly. "Leo, want some ice cream?" No answer. "How about a bedtime story tonight?" The door stayed silent. I could hear the faint sound of a crayon dragging across paper inside. He disappeared into a world of his own, and I stayed on the outside, helpless. Instead of breaking the silence, I slowly sank into it with him, hoping time would fix it. But that parent-teacher meeting hit me like a slap. 2 years. At school, my boy hasn't spoken a single word. No hello, no answers. Doesn't sing. Doesn't read out loud. Just silence. That night, I stood in his room, looking at the walls, covered with drawings in angry red. A burning house, a woman walking away, and a man, me, standing at the door. In that moment, I saw it clearly. I've been living with my son for 2 years, but I left him to grow up in a world with no voice at all. And for the first time in my life, I was scared of my own home. I can still see Leo in those first days after Claire left. Every afternoon, he'd sit on the front steps, holding that little toy car, eyes fixed on the road in front of our house. No crying, no questions, just waiting. One evening, I came home late. He was still there, long after dark. The dim yellow streetlight fell across his pale little face, and those empty eyes, they scared me. After that, I buried myself in work. I told myself I was doing it for him, but the truth is, I just didn't want to come home, didn't want to face the silence waiting for me at the door. I thought if I made enough money, things would get better. But what he needed was me, and I wasn't there. Leo never threw tantrums, never got angry. He just kept pulling away. Day by day, he hid in his drawings. I hid in my work. Same house, 2 different planets. Some nights, I'd stand by his bed, watching him sleep. A little boy's face should be carefree, but between his tiny eyebrows, a faint crease had already formed. 8 years old, with eyes that looked 10 years older. On his 7th birthday, it was just the 2 of us. I bought a small cake, lit a candle, forced a smile. Make a wish, buddy. He just stared at the flame, silent. I blew the candle out for him. The room went dark, and my tears fell on the cake. Leo sat there still, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't understand why his dad was crying. That moment, I knew I was losing him. But I clung to this foolish hope that time would heal everything. And time passed. The only thing that grew was the distance between us. Until yesterday, Mr. Parker's words, "I'm afraid one day we'll lose him before we even understand what's happening," kept echoing in my head. On the drive home, I glanced at the rearview mirror. Leo sat in the back seat, hugging his backpack, eyes staring out the window. Right before we went inside, he slipped a drawing into his bag and walked past me. Not even a hello. That night, I opened our old photo albums. Leo, grinning ear to ear with his first bike. The 3 of us at the table, drawing together. Him on my shoulders, arms stretched out like he could touch the sky. Looking at those pictures, my chest tightened. I realized it's been 2 years since I last saw that smile in real life. And I asked myself, if I keep standing still, will my son one day disappear completely into that silent world? For the first time in 2 years, that question pushed me to move. This morning, I didn't go to work. I just drove. No destination. Stopped at a gas station on the side of the road. Sat there in the car for a long time, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Then I took a deep breath. If there's even one last chance, I will find my boy's voice again. No matter what it costs, I won't let the silence take him away from me. Not again. That morning, I sat there with my phone in my hand, my finger resting on the call button. Quitting a job, at my age, feels like jumping off a cliff. But staying put, watching my son sink deeper and deeper, that's even scarier. In the end, I made the call. I need to quit, for my son. There was a pause on the other end. Do what you have to do, Nathan. I put the phone down. In that moment, everything I thought was solid behind me just faded away. Only one thing felt certain. I will pull my boy out of this silence, no matter what it costs. That day, I drove Leo to school. When the car stopped, I just sat there, watching him walk through the gate. Other kids were laughing, calling out to each other. He walked alone. Halfway in, he paused, just for a second, and turned to look at me. Then he lowered his head and kept going. That single look told me one thing. If I wait any longer, I will lose him for good. At noon, I opened his bedroom door. On the desk, a neat pile of new drawings. Roads, skies, trees, all empty. No people, except for one drawing. A small car, 2 people sitting inside. For the first time in 2 years, his drawing wasn't just of himself. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. He wanted to leave. He wanted out. That afternoon, when I picked him up, I opened the car door and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, let's skip school. I quit my job. You and I, we'll go somewhere. Leo looked up, didn't say a word. He dug in his backpack, pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. His tiny hand trembled so much the lead snapped in half. But he kept writing. Where to? I smiled. Anywhere you want. He hugged his backpack, didn't write another word. But in his eyes, a faint light flickered, like sunlight breaking through fog. The next morning, we left town. No plan. I just drove, following whatever road opened up ahead. Leo sat in the passenger seat, hugging his bag, staring out the window. I tried to start a conversation. See those birds? They fly in a V shape to save their strength. He didn't turn to me, and my chest tightened. An hour later, as we approached a small town, I thought about stopping for lunch. Then I heard it, a soft, muffled sob. I glanced over. His shoulders were shaking. He turned his face to the window, both hands clutching the straps of his backpack. For the first time in 2 years, I saw him cry. I didn't reach for him. It's okay. We don't have to go in. We can stay right here as long as you want. After a while, he sniffled hard, then grabbed a piece of paper. His handwriting shaky. I don't like crowded places. I nodded. Okay, we'll take it to go. We got our food and left town, driving until we found an open field. The breeze was cool. We ate in silence. But this time, he finished his meal. When we were done, he wrote again. Can we sleep out here? I smiled. Sure. Tonight, we'll sleep in the car, under the stars. That night, we spread out blankets in the back of the car. Above us, the sky stretched forever. Stars thick as silver dust. I pointed up. See that? The North Star. My dad used to show it to me when I was your age. Leo lay still, staring up. Starlight shimmered in his eyes. I opened a notebook and wrote the first line. Day 1, the road out of silence. Dad and Leo. He looked at it, then picked up the pencil and drew one long straight line next to it, like a road that never ends. That night, I didn't sleep. I just listened to his breathing, steady and calm. For the first time, I saw him sleep peacefully, outside those 4 walls. And a tiny spark lit up inside me. Maybe, just maybe, we were on the right track. But I had no idea that after just one night, everything would change. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, the seat beside me was empty. Leo was gone. All that was left was a single drawing, and what was on that page stopped my heart. I jolted awake. The silence was deafening. Beside me, the spot where Leo had been sleeping was empty. For a few seconds, I thought I was still dreaming. But when my hand touched the cold blanket, my heart dropped straight to the floor. Leo, my voice cracked. The car door was slightly open. Outside, nothing but an empty field and fog-covered grass. On the seat, a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. A rough sketch. A burning house. A small boy standing in front, his back turned. A man behind him, reaching out, but not close enough to touch. Underneath, in shaky letters, "You don't see me." I gripped the paper so hard its edge tore. My chest felt crushed under a weight I couldn't lift. In that moment, I finally understood. For 2 years, I thought I'd been with my son. But in his eyes, I had never really seen him. I bolted out of the car. The morning fog was thick, the wind stinging my face. I ran across the field, shouting until my throat burned. "Leo, please, stay with me." No answer. Only the wind, screaming in my ears. I ran toward the road leading into town. I stopped a man unlocking his shop. "Did you see a boy?" 8 years old, gray jacket. He shook his head. I kept running, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. The streets grew busier. I searched every corner, every doorstep, every small figure I could see. Every second that passed, fear swallowed me whole. Then, turning onto a street near the square, I froze. In front of a small, old bookstore, a tiny figure sat curled up on the steps. Leo. He hugged his backpack, eyes fixed on the wooden sign above the door, as if the world around him didn't exist. I ran to him, dropped to my knees, pulled him into my arms. "Buddy, don't ever scare me like that again." Leo didn't push me away. Instead, he held out an old worn book. On the cover, a car driving across the states. His little finger pressed on the picture, and his eyes said everything. "Let's keep going." I held him tighter. My voice was breaking. "I'm sorry. I thought taking you out of the house would be enough. But I never really saw you. From now on, you lead, I'll follow." He looked up at me, silent, but his eyes shining. He pulled out a piece of paper and slowly drew a single long line. His road. We bought that book. Inside, it was filled with maps and pictures of faraway places. Leo pointed at the photos, and I understood. From now on, this trip will be his. As we left town, I said, "Today, I'm not choosing the road. You point. I'll drive." Leo opened the book and pointed to a narrow road leading into the mountains. The path wound upward, lined with pine trees. No more busy towns, just wind in the branches. He rolled down the window, let the wind hit his face. For once, his hands dropped from that backpack. It was such a simple thing, but it almost made me cry. By late afternoon, we stopped by a quiet lake. The water was still, like glass. Leo pulled out paper and pencil, sat down. I didn't say a word, just sat beside him. His strokes were slow, careful. When he was done, he handed it to me. In the drawing, a boy and a man sat together by a lake. Above them, a sky full of stars. And in careful letters, he wrote, "Do you see me now?" I hugged him close, whispered, "Yes, Leo, I see you now." That night, after he fell asleep, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Day 2, you lead the way. I'll be right here, walking with you." Outside, the sky full of stars mirrored on the lake. But deep inside, I knew. The real test was still ahead. After that night by the lake, I thought I could finally see it. Leo was starting to open up. He began pointing out the roads. His drawings had people in them again. I thought I had finally reached him. I was wrong. In the days that followed, we left the lake and drove deeper into the mountains. The roads grew narrow and winding, just forest and valleys on both sides. Leo stayed quiet. But this time, he was the one leading. The old book rested on his lap, and at every turn, he'd raise a hand, pointing the way, without ever looking at me. At night, we stopped wherever we could, on a patch of grass, by a stream. I tried to build a new rhythm for us, boiling noodles on a tiny gas stove, hot cocoa, and a notebook we filled together. I'd write a sentence. He'd add a sketch. No words. But the pages kept filling up. The silence felt softer. Until that one afternoon, when the sky turned, dark clouds rolled down from the peaks. The wind tore through the trees, and within minutes, rain came crashing down, drowning the road in white. I pulled into an abandoned wooden shack. Rain hammered on the tin roof. I sat with Leo, handed him paper and pencil. As soon as he picked it up, his hand started to shake. The pencil slipped from his fingers. I put it back in his hand. "It's okay. I'm right here." He tried again, but the shaking got worse. Then suddenly, he covered both ears with his hands and bent down, pressing his head into his knees. Thunder cracked the sky open. His shoulders jerked. His whole body curled in on itself. I held him gently. "Leo, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." But he pulled away, retreating into himself, as if trying to vanish. When the trembling finally slowed, he picked up the pencil again, his hand still unsteady. In just a few strokes, he drew. A dark room, rain slashing through the window. A small boy in the corner, hands over his ears. And outside the window, a blurred shadow of a man, standing still in the storm. I stared at that drawing, my chest twisting. "When did you start being afraid of rain?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer, just kept his head down. For the first time, I understood. This silence wasn't just sadness. It came from a fear buried deep. That night, the rain didn't stop. I lay awake, watching him curled up, hands still clamped over his ears, even in his sleep. For the first time on this trip, I felt helpless. All the things I'd done, quitting my job, leaving home, driving hundreds of miles, suddenly felt so small against the storm he was carrying inside. By morning, the sky cleared. I made cocoa and set it in front of him. "Where to today?" He opened the book and pointed to a western mountain where a small village lay hidden in a valley. The village was quiet, scattered houses surrounded by pines. I rented a room at a small inn on the hillside. The owner, an elderly woman, watched Leo for a long moment before saying softly, "Stay as long as you need. But it gets cold at night." The room was simple. A wooden bed, a window that looked out over the valley. I thought he might feel safe here. But the moment we stepped in, Leo froze. His eyes locked onto a painting hanging on the wall. A family of 3, holding hands. He turned away and pulled out his paper, drawing nonstop. That evening, he didn't eat with me. Near midnight, just as I was dozing off at the table, I heard the soft rustle of paper. He placed a sheet in front of me. A small house, the door open, a boy standing on the front step, looking out. Behind him, a tall figure, and under it, for the first time, a long, shaky line of words, blurred with tears. "Dad, I don't want to be in the house anymore." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It wasn't anger. It was a plea. Leo had fallen asleep by the window, dried tears still on his cheeks. I pulled a blanket over him. Outside, the valley lay under a blanket of fog. The next morning, before we left, the old woman pressed a bag of bread into my hand and whispered, "He's a good boy." But in his eyes, there's a fear buried deep. "Don't let go of him." I nodded. Her words felt like a warning. I knew then. The days ahead wouldn't just be a trip. There were doors from the past we would have to open. And I had no idea that just a few hours later, at a small festival in this village, one of those doors was about to be blown wide open. That morning, the mountain village was livelier than usual. Thin sunlight spread across the wooden roofs. The air smelled of pine, carried by the wind, mixed with the sound of laughter. The small square was decorated with bright flags, and a stage stood at its center. The innkeeper smiled at us. "Today's the big festival. There'll be music, puppets, sweets. Kids love it." I looked at Leo. He hugged his book tight, eyes caught between curiosity and hesitation. I leaned down and whispered, "Just a walk. If you don't like it, we'll leave. Deal?" He stayed quiet for a few seconds, then nodded slightly. The square grew crowded. Music played, and the scent of sweet pastries floated in the air. Leo walked beside me, his small hand icy cold. Every time laughter burst too close, I could feel his hand tense. We moved slowly, stopping at a face-painting stall. Bright jars of color lined the table. Kids giggled as their faces turned into tigers, dragons. Leo froze, staring at the colors. "Do you want to try?" I asked. He hesitated, then gave a small nod. The painter leaned down and began to brush the first strokes. I stayed right next to him so he could feel safe. For a moment, everything felt calm, until the first drumbeat exploded from the stage. Boom. The sound hit like a shockwave. Leo flinched hard. Another boom, followed louder. The color drained from his face. Then he bolted. "Leo!" I shouted, pushing through the crowd. The square turned into chaos. Music, drums, voices, all mashed together into one suffocating roar. I forced my way through, calling his name, catching glimpses of a small gray jacket, and then losing it again. I cut through a side alley, heart pounding, lungs burning. Finally, behind the stage, in a narrow, empty lane, I saw him. Leo was pressed against a stone wall, hands clamped over his ears, shoulders shaking. The paint on his cheek streaked down with tears. I dropped to my knees beside him, keeping a little distance, and spoke slowly, softly. "Leo, it's me. I'm here. There's no one here. Just you and me." He didn't react, just kept trembling. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, once, twice, a third time. I let him see the rhythm of my breathing. Little by little, his hands loosened. One of them reached out and held onto mine. I closed my fingers around his hand, as gently as if I were holding a bird that had just survived a storm. We sat there, in that alley, until the drums outside finally faded. I wiped the smeared paint from his cheeks. He pulled out paper and pencil from his backpack, his hands still shaking, but he forced himself to draw. A stage full of bright colors, hundreds of people around, and in the middle, a tiny figure standing alone. Underneath, he wrote, "I'm scared of loud sounds. I'm scared of everyone looking at me." The letters were shaky, but clear. My chest tightened. 2 years of silence. Finally, they had turned into words. I put my hand on his shoulder. "I understand now. I won't let you stand alone in front of a crowd again. Whenever you feel scared, just hold my hand." "Okay." Leo looked up at me. His eyes were red, and for the first time, he held my hand. Tight. We left the square quietly. That afternoon, we said nothing. Leo sat by the window, his book in his lap. I opened our journal and wrote, "Day 5, today you ran." But this time, I caught up. I handed the book to him. He drew one more line, a small hand holding onto a larger one. When night came and Leo fell asleep, I stepped out to the porch. The moon hung cold over the silent forest. But in my head, I could still hear the drums. I thought I understood all of his fears. But that moment in the alley, the way his small hand trembled in mine, made me realize there's something deeper, darker, something he still hasn't told me. And soon, I will have to face it. After what happened at the festival, I thought I finally understood my son. But the further we traveled, the more I realized. Leo's fear wasn't just about drums or crowds. A gust of wind rattling an old tin roof, a car horn in the distance, and I'd see his shoulders tense again. That's when I knew there's a darkness deeper than I'd imagined, still wrapped around him. One night, parked deep in the forest, I gathered my courage and asked, "Leo, can you tell me what happened that night?" He looked up for a long time, then lowered his head and started to draw. He drew, then tore the page, drew again, tore again, 5 times. Finally, he put the pencil down and turned away. I just sat there, listening to the wind howling through the mountain pass. Days later, we reached a small town and set up camp on an open patch of ground overlooking the valley. That night, the sky was clear. The wind was sharp. I lit a fire. Its flickering light danced across his face. Leo opened his notebook, laid it on his lap, and started to draw. Slow, steady, different from all the other times. Line by line, the picture came together. A house, its roof crooked, made of tin. A man holding a bottle, his face scratched out. A woman on her knees, arms over her head. Rain pouring down, white and heavy. And in the corner, a small boy, standing, frozen. I stopped breathing. My heart pounded in my chest. That scene ripped open a memory I had buried deep. That rainy night 2 years ago. The shouting, the final fight, and my son's eyes, watching from the corner of the room. At the bottom of the page, in shaky letters, he wrote the longest sentence he's written in 2 years. That night, I saw everything. My eyes blurred. The sounds came back to me. Things breaking, doors slamming, voices screaming. And me, the one who was supposed to protect him, was the one who locked him inside his own fear. "Leo, I'm sorry. I scared you so badly that you couldn't speak anymore, didn't I?" My voice cracked. He kept his head down. Tears fell onto the page, smearing the ink. I asked, my hands shaking, "What do I have to do, Leo, to open that door?" He didn't answer. He tore out another page, drew a closed door. Behind it, a small child, curled up, almost fading away. And then, he handed me the pencil. Time stopped. For the first time in 2 years, he was letting me step into his world. I held the pencil and drew a large hand, placed gently next to the child, not pulling, not forcing, just there. Then I wrote, "I'm not leaving anymore. I'll sit right here, for as long as it takes." Leo stared at the drawing for a long time. Then slowly, he drew a small hand, resting on top of the large one. No words, but that picture said more than anything I could ever hear. That night by the fire, Leo wrote, "I'm scared of rain. I'm scared of your yelling. I thought you were going to leave me forever." I read every word, each one cut deep, but I stayed quiet and let him pour it all out. Close to dawn, he leaned his head on my shoulder. The notebook opened between our hands. The fire was almost gone, just a faint warmth left. I knew the door had cracked open, and I also knew when morning came, there would be something I've longed to hear for 2 years, and also feared the most. Dawn came slowly, mist curling over the valley. Leo was still leaning against my shoulder, breathing steady. The longest night of my life was finally over. And this silence, it felt different now, lighter, like a door had cracked open. When the first rays of sunlight slipped through the tent, Leo opened his eyes. He reached for the notebook, turned to last night's drawing, the closed door, the big hand, and the small hand, and stared at it for a long time. Then, with trembling fingers, he picked up his pencil and wrote, "Dad, if you hadn't walked away that night." He stopped. The pencil froze on the page. I held my breath. Slowly, he wrote another line, stiff and uneven. "I wouldn't be this scared." I read every word, slowly. My chest tightened. I placed my hand over his small one. "You're right. That night, I did walk away. But starting today, I won't leave again. No matter what happens." Leo didn't write anything else. He just turned and looked at me, red-eyed, unsure. I leaned closer and nodded. Clear. No more words needed. We packed up. Before getting in the car, Leo stood there for a while, looking down at the valley. The morning wind tangled his hair. This time, I let him stand there as long as he wanted. When he turned back, his eyes didn't look so far away anymore. In the car, Leo opened his old book, but instead of pointing to the map, he flipped all the way to the last blank page, tapped on it, then handed it to me. I understood right away. He wanted the rest of this journey to be written from here, together. That afternoon, we stopped by an open field. Nothing but sky and wind. I sat beside him, and for the first time, I said the thing I'd been holding in. I let my anger take everything from me. I lost your mom, and I almost lost you. But from now on, I'll stay, as long as it takes. If you can just give me one more chance. Leo was silent. He spun a blade of grass in his fingers, his small shoulders tense. A long pause. The wind swept across the field. Then his lips moved. I leaned in, held my breath, and a sound came out, soft, fragile, like wind brushing past my ear. They're dead. Just one word. Quiet. But it struck like thunder. Everything went silent. My whole body trembled. Tears filled my eyes. I didn't hug him yet. I just held out my arms and waited. 1 beat, 2 beats. Then Leo threw himself into my arms. For the first time in 2 years. I'm here, I whispered, my hand shaking as I patted his back. I'm right here. We stayed there until the sun tilted low. No drawing, no writing, just sitting. The wind across the field blended with his breathing. For the first time, calm. Before dark, Leo opened his notebook. Turned to that last blank page. This time, his handwriting was steady. The first day I talked to Dad again, he put the pencil down. Looked up, I nodded. And from today, I said, we'll keep writing. Day by day, together. I pulled him close and closed my eyes. And in my head, that one word, Dad, kept echoing. Just one word. But it was enough to break open every locked door. Leo's dad stayed in my head for days after that. But I knew, one word isn't enough to erase 2 years of silence. It's just the first crack in a sheet of ice. Underneath, the ice is still thick, waiting for time to melt it. We kept driving deeper into the mountains. In the mornings, Leo opened his notebook. It wasn't just old maps anymore. Blank pages were filling with quiet scenes. The two of us by a stream, building a fire, sharing a simple meal. Sometimes, he'd hand me a page without me asking. Small changes, but to me, they felt like giant steps. Even so, I could still see it in his eyes. A door that hadn't opened yet. Something both of us were still avoiding. One afternoon, as we drove past a lakeside fairground, Leo stopped. His eyes locked on the slow-turning Ferris wheel. I saw his small hand tighten around the strap of his backpack. His breathing quickened. Want to try? I asked. He shook his head. That was all. I understood then. That night hadn't just been about the house. Noise, lights, crowds, all of it was a nightmare. We sat down on a bench by the lake. After a long while, I said softly, Leo, do you think it's time? We saw your mom. He turned. His eyes went wide, full of fear and hesitation. I'm not pushing, I said slowly. But maybe, if the three of us sit down together, it might feel lighter for you. What do you think? Leo lowered his head, opened his notebook, and with shaky hands wrote, I'm scared. Mom won't forgive you. I read it and nodded. I'm scared too, but I don't want you to carry that fear alone anymore. He didn't answer, just hugged the notebook to his chest. That night, in a small motel room, I couldn't sleep. Through the window, I heard the insects outside, and in my head, I saw her face. The woman who had endured those 2 years. The woman I hadn't had the courage to face. I was afraid of her eyes, afraid of what I deserved to hear. But when I turned and saw Leo curled up on the other bed, I knew it was time. The next morning, I pulled the car over to the side of the road, took out my phone. 2 years since I last dialed that number. My fingers shook so hard the screen blurred. When I hit the call button, the ringing felt endless. Hello. Her voice was steady, but deep down, I could hear the tremor. It's me, Nathan. Silence. We've been on the road, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. I want to meet, to say I'm sorry, and for Leo to see his mom. The line went quiet again, just the sound of her breath. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. If Leo wants to, then yes. That afternoon, I told him. Leo didn't say anything, just hugged his notebook. But when I asked, do you want to try? He nodded, slowly. I gripped the steering wheel. The road back to the city began from that moment. The day came, the sky pale with sunlight. We arrived almost an hour early. The cafe was quiet. Leo sat beside me, clutching his notebook to his chest, eyes fixed on the door. The wall clock ticked. Time felt frozen. Then, The door opened. Light spilled in from outside, and she walked in. Leo's fingers tightened on the notebook so hard his knuckles turned white. She slowed her steps and stopped at our table. No one spoke. In that moment I knew 2 years of silence were about to be broken by a few words, or sealed forever. She stood there, only a few steps away. Light from the street spilled through the doorway, casting a pale golden strip across the wooden floor. Inside the cafe, every sound seemed to vanish. I could hear my own heartbeat, and Leo's quick, shallow breaths. He sat frozen, his small fingers digging into the edge of his notebook. I leaned down and whispered, "Leo." Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes met hers. 2 years of silence. All the memories collided in that one look. No words, only tears gathering in her eyes. Leo's hands trembled as he opened the notebook. He turned the pages as if touching something fragile. He stopped at the very first page and held it out to her. A shaky drawing, 3 people standing together, and below it, a small line of words. "I miss us." Her hand reached out, fingertips brushing the paper. A tear fell, smudging the pencil lines. She sat down, and in silence, she turned the pages. Each drawing telling the story Leo had been unable to speak. The roads, the forests, nights by the fire. I saw her shoulders begin to shake. All of these, you drew them." Her voice was hoarse. Leo nodded. Then, instead of closing the notebook, he picked up the pencil. Slow, stiff letters appeared on the page. "I'm sorry for being silent. I just didn't want to make you and Dad sadder." The pencil slipped from his hand. In that moment, she stood, came around the table, bent down, and wrapped her arms around him. Leo's body went rigid at first. Then slowly, he let go. For the first time in 2 years, I sat there in silence, not stepping in, just watching them, and something in my chest finally came undone after 2 years of holding it all in. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry. All of this was my fault. I let my anger hurt you both. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I only ask, please, don't let Leo carry this fear alone anymore." She looked up at me, no anger left in her eyes, only exhaustion and tenderness. "I can't forget what happened," she said softly. "But today, I can see that both of you have changed." I nodded. "Like a vow, I will change, so the 3 of us can help him heal." Together, we left the cafe when the sun had already dipped. The last light of the day stretched long across the street. Leo walked between us, holding both our hands. His little hand was still cold, but this time it wasn't shaking. Before getting into the car, Leo opened his notebook and wrote one more line. "I don't want us to be apart anymore." She read it, smiling through tears. "Me neither," she whispered. I looked at my son, and for the first time, there was a trace of peace in his eyes. That night, back at the motel, Leo didn't fall asleep right away. He sat by the window and wrote on the very last page of his notebook. "Today, I saw Mom again. I'm not scared anymore, because Dad kept his promise." I read it, my throat tight. For the first time in 2 years, the letters were steady. Leo closed the notebook, handed it to me, and slipped under the blanket. His voice, soft as wind but certain. "Dad, can we keep going tomorrow?" I nodded and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, but this time, we won't be going alone." The lights went out. In the dark, the room was filled with the sound of steady breathing. And for the first time in 2 years, silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It had turned into peace. The kind of peace the 3 of us would now try to find together. The next morning, while the city was still half asleep, I heard a soft rustling sound. Leo was sitting at the table, shoulders slightly hunched. Morning light spilled over him, turning his messy hair into a glowing halo. I walked closer, quietly. On the page in front of him, lines began to appear. A long open road, a blue sky, and 3 figures walking side by side. No rain, no dark streaks. When he noticed me standing behind him, he turned. And for the first time, there was no trace of fear in his eyes. He pushed the notebook toward me. "Dad, draw with me." I picked up the pencil. My hand touched the corner of the page, and I added a small rising sun. The light seemed to spread across the drawing. For the first time in 2 years, my hand didn't shake. Before leaving the city, we walked together along the riverbank. The water drifted slowly, catching the sunlight in broken, dancing strips. The breeze from the river carried the smell of grass and earth. Leo walked between us, his hands in mine and in his mother's, his steps steady, unhurried. I looked at him, then turned to her and said quietly, "I don't know what the future will be, but I promise you this. Even if we don't share the same roof anymore, I will walk with you. With both of you. I won't walk away again." She held my gaze for a long moment. No nod, no shake of the head, but her eyes were no longer cold. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something that comes in a day. It's a road. And today, we've only just taken the first step. Leo's small hand tightened, as if trying to keep us close. And in that moment, I understood. For 2 years, I had been afraid of everything. Afraid of the past. Afraid of my son's eyes. But all he had needed was for me to stay. By late afternoon, our car rolled slowly out of the city. In the back seat, Leo leaned against the window, hugging the notebook full of drawings. Wind slipped in through the cracked glass, carrying with it the scent of fields. In the rearview mirror, I saw him smile. A small smile, but enough to light up the road ahead. That night, we stopped by a wide open field. The sky above stretched forever, scattered with stars. Leo lay next to me, no longer curled up tight. The notebook lay open beside him, the last page carrying just one simple line. "Tomorrow, I'll keep drawing, because there's still so much I want to see with Dad." I placed my hand on that page, feeling a quiet gratitude rise inside me, not because everything was fixed, but because we had begun again, and this time we would move forward together. Leo closed the notebook, handed it to me, then pulled the blanket over himself. His voice was small but steady. "Dad, can we keep going tomorrow?" I nodded, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, but this time, we won't be going alone." I turned off the light. Outside, the stars stretched out like a glowing road, and in the dark, the three of us lay side by side. For the first time in 2 years, silence was no longer something to fear. It had become peace, a peace we would now walk into, together, under this same sky.